So, what sprang from the Venetian black nobility um, in the 17th and 18th century is a fusing of a few new families, but in particular, a new bent in their existing philosophy of human degradation. And I'm going to begin briefly with the story of Sabbatai Zevi. And again, here's some of the authors I'm drawing from, and I'm going to go through a real superficial account of him. But in short, he is a self-proclaimed messiah, and figures go as high as 80% of world Jewry was behind him, believing in him. Upon his death, Sabbatai Zevi would end up marching into Turkey. He was held captive, given the choice of converting or dying. He converts. It sets the template up for this idea of being a crypto actor in this larger agenda. And the agenda would be forwarded also by Jacob Frank. And the idea here is ascension through dissension. And Rabbi Antelman phrased it like this. They believe this is the combination now between these followers of Sabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank, who considered himself the reincarnated Zevi. And together we get a cult, is what most of these doctors and rabbis are calling this. They believe sin is holy and should be practiced for its own sake. So before I go on, we've got two competing ideas. One is the traditional biblical worldview, where God stands outside of creation and reveals himself through his prophets. This other worldview over here is that God is part of creation. It's atomism, it's Kabbalism, it's reductionism, it's pantheism. So God is part of everything. In the first model, God stands out. God is perfect. He is good. Evil exists when in relation to God's light. Okay. So the other view is there is no distinction between good and evil, yin and yang. And this is where they're getting at. God does not stand outside of creation. He is going to be alchemically formed by embracing the evil that makes God good. And I know that's slightly confusing, but according to the Talmud, says Antelman, the Messiah will come when the human population, we can sort of think about what Foucault might call the human population, either becomes righteous or totally corrupt. Totally corrupt. The Sabbateans opted for debauchery. Since we cannot all be saints, let us be sinners. So we're telling a story here that there's a religion in place, not the biblical tradition where God stands outside of creation, but one where people are their own gods and creating godhood. It's part of an assisted evolution of a project. And in order for it to be fulfilled, the phoenix out of the ashes, order out of chaos, we're going to get redemption through sin, through something all these authors identify exists in the Talmud and could easily be argued as the natural outcome of reading the Talmud. So we're talking about a religion that's involving itself in a grand initiation, a web, if you will, of debauchery in order for it to see its Messiah. And you can look at that list of, this is what happened. Okay. So we're not it's a messianic project. There's messianic characters. Zevi was part of one. Frank was part of one, but there's going to be this final messianic actor that is connected to an apocalyptic event. And what's interesting, if you read this, this is why it doesn't make sense at the university. It's not one damn thing after another history that's disconnected without a teleos or purpose. This is people saying, you know what? We're going to manufacture events on the ground biopolitically to make the conditions right that people are optimally degraded to bring about a Messiah on the face of the earth. Of course, he's going to have a one world government and economic system in place, as many biblical and esoteric and Talmudic prophecies suggest. So there's a final eschatology. It's going to be this alchemical pushing between the fusions inside of the eugenics of the oligarchical class themselves and their husbandry over the general population. And again, through classic old world oligarchical methods, they are going to degrade in order to enslave the populations, all the way down to these mechanisms of through discipline, using institutions to create policies. They're going to create a mass that they can control for this final eschatological project. So again, Antelman's going to say their blasphemous benediction, who permits the forbidden, later became the Satanists, do as thou wilt. So again, they're part of the intelligence service of the Venetians, part of their intelligence. They're going to make the playhouses. They're going to control the studios and control the memes and manufacture cultures in order for their project of redemption, salvation through sin. And it's going to be a grand initiation. And this is a lot of merging of people and forces here, but I'll just bring this down to a moment. In 1773, an unholy trinity. If you've kind of looked into oligarchical or deep state collusions in the past, those are three pretty big names right there. So Jacob Frank, his families are interconnecting with other players on the ground, and these include certain Jesuit agents and so forth. But the banking elite is interfused in every possible way with the Sabbatean project of ascension through dissension, and that they see themselves as a messianic people to bring around the fruition of this messianic character. And again, this is a combination of the different authors that we were talking about through the infiltration. This is using the classic techniques of the Venetian oligarchy that they are mostly already a part of. The invisible network went into play. Invisible network, we're talking about biopolitics, elusive to rational investigation. 41 years after Zebi's death, we have the beginning of all the lodges and the associations that are going to be spread up, and the little cults and the fusions and the psyops, all for this one project to control through degradation. But what's more powerful here, we see that, the part of this idea, the template of the crypto, these Sabbateans would become Muslim, these Sabbateans would become Christians, these Sabbateans would become Jewish and Buddhist, whatever needed, so that they, within that strain of the oligarchy, are going to really push it toward this more intensely apocalyptic approach to world control. Okay, so again, they're also called the cult of the eye-seeing eye, all-seeing eye. So if you're wondering about that, that's their tip-off of who they are, certainly who they see themselves are, and they're religious chameleons. They are everywhere. They're the good guys and the bad guys. They create the wars and profit from them for their project of final enslavement. And we can see the members, and these have been traced through all of the authors I've talked about, everybody from the Roosevelts, the Churchills, Hitler. Yeah, you can argue about that one a little bit. The papacy, Franco, Mussolini. We're seeing that they're in Japan and China, so that the race is not necessarily how somebody looks on the outside. They're all part of this elusive project that Foucault talks about. So why all the free porn? Because I'm not going to go into an exercise of pornography, because it's been tested. It has, in terms of weaponizing culture and entertainment, it has the maximum effect. But to step into this new world order, they don't want people to have a particular love of nation, family, our own history, our own being. But instead, if you're going to step into a new order, everything that you kind of loved, you're kind of doubting. Hollywood is supposed to be good guys and bad guys, and now it's, celebration of spirit cooking. Say, I'm addicted to it, but I still hate it, Okay, so politics, I'm addicted, still have to say what Trump said, but I hate it. I know that there's no difference between reality since Reagan, it's pretty much it's kind of in your face. These are lifetime crisis actors. Get it, get it, get it, get it. They want us, and part of the idea of deindustrializing our nations is part of that. If you lift that part of the world up and take us down, walking into this one world situation is a little less dramatic. So it's all part of moving us toward this messianic project. And again, in the final, where it's going, your control comes through, as Michael Dillon will say, biopolitical control through securitization. That's where we keep moving toward that. And part of it will be dealing with the code and casting the whole of human concentration. This is the end game, because your concentration from an esoteric and a biblical worldview has ties to the other dimension. So it's about final casting of that for one project of singularity that is in part connected to the project of the apocalypse and the rise of the Messiah, or some people might call it the rise of the beast system and the Antichrist. So again, the methods that we use, we look at the oligarchical class, how they're behind all the major events of creating, we'll call it globalism 1.0 and 2.0, and the interconnection of this world, that we're all attached to this machinery, and that it's continually extracting our life being, but it has a goal of introducing sin into the world. Now, we might think that's an abstract concept, but the bankers and their monopolies and their cronies are working toward bringing sin into the world. And through my study of this, it is connected then with this larger Hermetic Kabbalistic techniques of casting other dimensional entities into the bodies of the population. Okay, and that's where it gets to sound a little wild, but there are ancient techniques in doing that, and that's really how that's in its most complete sense, when the bodies are most cast with these entities. Sin, in the Talmudic sense, the weight of the world will move this, and the Messiah must come. So it's really about demon casting, as strange as that sounds. So we're acquiescing to this. A little free cable over here saying, I don't know why all the movies you have to pay for, but it's in your face. We're boiling away. And we're waiting for this character, the Messiah of the Talmud. And within many of these texts, there's ideas of population control. And we see that behind this esoteric agenda that Foucault calls elusive, that's creation of this master race, we're seeing that it's got a messianic feature to it. And when that time comes, depopulation is part of this agenda. Now, if this is not absolutely going to happen or doesn't roll out this way, I'm just putting it on the table and connecting a few dots here. So I want to finish this, that for some, when we began to see these competing eschatologies, that for some it might point to a real good and an evil, because the ultimate force behind this Machiavellian approach to rule that the oligarchs have is that if you're willing to suspend good and evil, or go beyond good and evil, you will be given the right to rule, the keys to rulership. And for that, earthly rule in earthly Jerusalem, there is a price, according to these contending eschatologies, that you're not allowed admittance into the heavenly Jerusalem. And you can see that's well explained in the book of Galatians by Paul, that there is an earthly project and an earthly Jerusalem and a heavenly Jerusalem. And part of what we're doing with our concentration, to the extent that we can control this, we can kind of think about what that means in politics today, the distinction between an earthly and a heavenly Jerusalem.